Thank you for tuning in for our recorded event today, Coffee and Conversation, How to Construct a Story with Dave Tirrell-Wysocki. Before we dive in and turn it over to Dave, I just want to go over and introduce Dave. Dave is a retired Associated Press newsman and former director of the Loeb School of Communications in Manchester, New Hampshire. He spent over 3 decades working with the Associated Press in a variety of different environments as a newsman. He brings a deep knowledge of writing and interviewing and much, much more. After his time at the Associated Press, he led the Loeb School of Communications for over a decade, where he brought a variety of different educational resources to people through the Loeb School that range all kinds of topics, from writing to interviewing to podcasting, content development, social media, and much, much more, with experts across all industries. I do want to make mention of the Morgan Franklin Fellowship Foundation. We are happy to continue to provide these great events and resources. You can learn more about our upcoming events, the resources on our website, as well as our flagship program, which is the Standards of Financial Literacy course. You can learn more about all of those things at morganfranklinfellowship.com.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks very much to everyone for signing on, tuning in this morning. And thanks first to Morgan Franklin Fellowship Foundation for offering us this opportunity to talk about how to construct a story. While it may be a little outside the normal topic, constructing a story and communicating is the base for pretty much any topic, any subject you do, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's preserving a family story, a customer presentation, pitching an idea to a boss, writing an article, writing a lesson plan, boosting your business, boosting yourself, or for Morgan Franklin Fellows, I'm offering a presentation about financial literacy. So my goal is to offer some guidance and some tips on how to develop and communicate a clear message through written stories or oral presentations. No matter what the purpose is, all that list and many more than I just gave, you still have to develop a message, correct? And you still have to communicate that message, pass it along to someone else. What's the purpose of a message? And there's a key element, and it's the same no matter what the platform and no matter what the message. The key element is words, period. Choosing the correct ones and organizing them coherently. Words. Words are your tool. Choosing the correct words will help develop and present a clear and concise message. Video and blogs, and podcasts, PowerPoints, they're the tools you use to help present the message and to present those words, but the words have to be there first. So first, kind of a disclaimer, this is not rocket science, but it does require some thoughtful tweaking of the writing and the communication you already do every day. That tweaking helps translate the message from your world to the world of your audience, whether it's a specific group, a specific profession, one person reading your story, or the general public. So words are important. And much of that tweaking, when you're talking about words, involves putting yourself in the shoes of the person receiving your message. Writing not as the sender all the time, but writing with a clear knowledge that someone else has to read and translate your message. So thinking about putting together a message that you, the audience, will want to listen to, which has been in my mind completely while doing this presentation. I mean, I can give you a million tips on things based on my knowledge and based on things I do as a writer. But if I don't think, how is this going to translate? How's it going to be received? Is it going to be understood? Am I using too much insider language, too much jargon to obscure the message? Then I haven't done my job. So I'm putting myself in your shoes, asking the moderators, who's in the audience? What's their background? Do we have writers? Do we have students? who's there? Got scared because I thought one of my mentors from the AP was in the audience. That's scary because she critiqued my writing for years. So is this you? You're coming up on a deadline, right, for your project. You have to write something as an article, as a news release. You have to put together a presentation, either a Zoom presentation or one for an audience, and you haven't started. Or you've started and you're running up against a roadblock because it's so overwhelming. You have too many people to talk to, or you've already talked to too many people. You have so much information from your research. You have no clear message, and you have no more coffee. That could be you. It's been me. It's been probably anybody who writes a story, writes a column, writes a message, puts together a proposal like this. It could extend further. After, when I was director at the Loeb School, I had people come in to deliver messages all the time. Some got there a half hour early, plugged in their computer, made sure their graphics worked. I was responsible for making sure the sound and audio and visuals worked. They came prepared and tried to overcome that feeling of being overwhelmed. But there are others who flew in the room at 8:59, jammed their computer at me and said, okay, can you hook this up and can we be ready to go in 1 minute? Sometimes, not all the time. I was crawling behind the speaker, plugging in computer and audio and sound and their video often, and that's overwhelming also for the host. Those are things that, each person has their own style. You can deal with it, but it gives, getting there early, being prepared, helps overcome that feeling of being overwhelmed. So if that's you, that paragraph about too much information, where do I start? When do I start? You're not alone. So let's try to break this down into less overwhelming segments. Let's break it down in these 4 easy parts. Gathering your information, which means, of course, doing your research, which could mean looking at old newspapers, which could mean reading scholarly works, which could mean interviewing people in person, all part of gathering information and more. There are other ways too, just observing, attending an event, organizing your info. What do you keep? What do you throw out? You will find, if you've done this, and you will find when you do it, you throw out a lot more than you keep. It's the film that ends up on the cutting room floor. There is a lot to throw out. Preparing your report or your presentation, using all the information you haven't thrown out and putting it together in an organized way, in a way that will adequately communicate the message that you're trying to get across. And then presenting the info. If it's written, presenting means hitting the send button. If it's an oral presentation, it means getting up at the podium, hopefully not at 8:59, and gathering and doing your information that way. So easy peasy, right? Those 4 steps. That's what all that overwhelming part. Sometimes it helps, and sometimes it makes the project easier to tackle. So gathering information. First, you have to understand your goal. What are you trying to communicate, and what is your audience? And by understanding your goal, are you trying to pitch a new idea at work? Are you developing an easy to understand presentation for financial literacy? Using that as a topic, there are a million different avenues you can go. Looking at today, financial literacy during a pandemic, more important than ever. Name the topic. Anything during a pandemic, more important than ever. It's a way to focus a broad topic and tell people why we're talking about this topic today and why it's important today. Also, understanding, are you trying to write a news release about a program? Are you introducing someone who's new to your organization? Something that might be going to the general public. So then you have to start to look for ideas to help, look for information to help support your ideas. And developing the message sometimes starts before then. At least the outline of a message. Sometimes that message changes a little as you begin to gather your information. So you use the information from your research to help refine your message. And that's something that can evolve as you go along, but you need to have the idea in your mind when you start, or else where do you start? That is an easy way to get overwhelmed. Online research, great. It's a great tool. It makes things so much easier, because in the past you literally would go to a library and pull a drawer and get a microfilm, or pull an old newspaper sheet to do your research. It certainly makes it easier to find things that were there before and just not necessarily accessible. But you all know this. You've seen the quote, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." Abraham Lincoln, supposedly his great quote. You can't believe everything that's on the internet. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's true. So how do you guard against that? Checking multiple sources, not just one. Being careful that the sources don't just refer to each other, which frequently happens. You read a story, then you go to another source on the same topic, and wow, that wording sounds very familiar. Sometimes different sources on the internet quote each other. Well, if 5 other sources quote one that's not necessarily accurate, you're out of luck sometimes. So check the authors of the information you're looking for. Check the sources they cite, if indeed they cite them. Check the wording to make sure there aren't key phrases or sentences that aren't just lifted and put in other stories. Check the dates of publication. You may want to go back to the first instance of an article or a research about your topic. You may want to go to the newest. You also want to make sure you're using some common sense. So you can weigh the information depending on all the things that you've checked. You can weigh it depending on the dates involved. And you can note contradictory information. Just because Article A contradicts Article B, it doesn't mean one of them is useless. They're both very useful, because resolving the discrepancies, right, or presenting the discrepancies in your work becomes part of the research and part of the presentation. Also, just remember that just because something's in the popular media today doesn't necessarily mean it's true. You've heard the term that the media is the first draft of history. First drafts get changed frequently. So again, that's a case of looking at the publication times. See when a story is updated. Part of research is seeing how a story is updated. If you're doing research on those kinds of topics, how did information about wearing masks change from a year ago? It's different. So there's a way. It doesn't mean that what was said first was wrong at the time and what's being said now is right. It means there is an evolution of information. So look for facts that support your message, but also pay attention to information that challenges your message. That information can lead to a more informed message. Geez, I hadn't thought of that. Wow. It helps focus what you're thinking about. And remember info that you find that's surprising. I call it the oh wow moment in reading a story, listening to a presentation. It's information that you say, oh wow, didn't know that, or oh wow, ooh, what a neat way to say that. That info can help later in your later steps when you're interviewing someone and then when you're preparing. One thing that really helps in a presentation is remembering a fact or an explanation that really clarified something in your mind. I do some freelance writing for a hospital. Was talking to a cancer doc about different treatments, and he said, our whole goal in evaluating and searching and changing and tweaking combinations of cancer treatment is to find that combination that opens the combination lock on the cancer cell so we can get in there and kill it. What a great image. Most people have I'm taking this drug, taking that. He said, it's about taking drugs, but it's finding the drug that has the key, or finding the drug that has the right combination to open that combination and let us in. Because if we can get in, that's the goal for his type of treatment. That was a great image. That helped me explain what he was doing, and hopefully gave readers a reason to continue on and reading the story, or perhaps support their work. You never know where it's going to lead. If your project involves setting a historical scene, life in the 50s, life in the 60s, don't just read the news stories in the old papers or magazines. Look at the ads, because the ads in stories in a newspaper in the 50s or in a magazine in the 50s really help set the tone for what life was like. How much did a TV cost in 1955 or 1959? And not just how much did it cost, how much were people making? Which kind of puts into perspective how much of somebody's weekly salary perhaps went toward, or monthly salary, went toward buying a TV. It just adds perspective. In your research, you never know what's going to happen, and you follow that. In going down the list of people who were here this morning, you never know. And one name was an oh wow moment for me. Mark Okrant, welcome. And it's nice to see you on the screen. I added this in the last 5 minutes because you never know what's going to happen, and you have to be flexible, and you can add your presentations. For those of you who don't know, Mark, in his other life, in a previous life, was a professor of hospitality tourism at Plymouth State University. Well, I'm at the AP, and the new PR person from Plymouth State calls and says, hey, you have time for me to come down and talk to you about stories? And I'm thinking, no, I don't have time to have somebody come down and sit down and talk about stories. And I said, yeah, I have plenty of time. When would you like to come down and talk about stories? So we set a time. He came down, we had coffee, and he brought a stack of Plymouth State magazines and information, and he was great. What kind of stories are you looking for at the AP? How can I help you? All kinds of logistical stories. And it was a great conversation. And he left the pile of information and said, look, I promise you there's something in there that you will like and want to write about. And I said, I promise you I will look at it and get back to you. So I, over a couple of weeks, was going through the pile, and I found a story about this guy named Mark Okrant, who was a professor who was having trouble having the school, or I guess there was a budget issue with buying textbooks for his hospitality class. So he started writing his own textbooks. And not just textbooks, but murder mysteries set at historical vacation spots, grand hotels. And his detective, in order to solve the crime, had to learn how the hotel ran. What kind of complaints does the desk clerk get at 3 a.m? What are all those tunnels under the building? Who's the go-to person when you want to find out shady things that might be happening at the hotel? And so I'm looking at this, I said, wow, that's a great education story. So I wrote a story about this professor who was using his imagination to write educational stories. It also ended up being a travel story. So I wrote a story. Elegant resorts long for glowing accounts of their sumptuous meals, breathtaking views, and meticulous service. But how about a shady employee, a missing guest, a murder? It ended up on page 1 of USA Today's travel section with a nice picture of the Grand Hotel, nice picture of Mark, So you never know where your research is going to take you, and you need to go there. And that was a great trip. The PR guy did his job. Mark obviously did his job, and I thankfully did my job. And the goal is the same. I want to write a story that people read. I want to write a good story that gets a lot of exposure. Mark certainly wanted to have the exposure. Plymouth State was ecstatic about the exposure, maybe not about the paragraph that said the reason he had to write the books is because there wasn't a budget. Your research is going to lead. Part of research, obviously, is an interview. And if it is an interview, you need to do some of the research beforehand to develop the questions. Like reading Mark's book before I went to interview him about why you're writing these books. But beware, an interview is more than getting answers to a list of questions. Your questions clearly are important, but the answers are more important. Use the list of questions as a guideline. Don't go down the list and check things off one by one as you answer them, because then you're just waiting for the person to stop talking. So you can pop another question in, and you'll miss what they're saying. You'll miss a chance at a follow-up. How closely you're listening is directly related to the number of times you say, wait, what? And ask a follow-up about something you've heard. If it's just, okay, you answered that question, you're not going to get it. Fritz Weatherby did a presentation for us at school on telling a family story, and he was interviewing someone, and he was talking about, don't go in with your list, because the list will say, when did you move to New Hampshire? How long have you been here? Where did you come from? Why did you move to New Hampshire? He sat down to start the interview, and the person says, so, do you want to start before the explosion or after the explosion? He didn't know there was an explosion. Let's start with the explosion. And then the conversation started with an explosion that blew up this person's workplace. That's a nice way to start an interview. She certainly wanted to talk about it. It was a subject that was comfortable, and they slid into the interview that way instead of name, rank, serial number, just the facts man. What happens when you ask yes or no questions? You get yes or no answers. Unless you're doing a cross-examination in court, when that's all you want, it's often not helpful. So we ask open-ended questions. Not, will this proposal prevent a tax hike? Instead, how will this proposal affect taxes? It makes the person explain the issue instead of the easy out, which is, you bet it will raise taxes, or no, it won't. If you ask a yes or no question, don't be surprised, you're going to get a yes or no answer. Ask questions that allow the person to be descriptive. You always see stories. It was the worst I'd ever seen. That doesn't help me, because I don't know where this person has been. A person from Florida talking about a cold snap is going to have a different answer than a person from New Hampshire talking about a cold snap. I've never been so cold in my life. Doesn't help. So what did you do? It was so cold, I wore my hat and gloves to bed. That tells you how cold it was, or how cold that person thought it was. It was like a war zone. We used to joke about that. You see it, you'll read it today 5 times in the paper. And it's actually maybe true today when you're looking at Washington, because it kind of does look like a war zone. But somebody's going to explain what that means. Of course, you're looking at the 5 W's, right? Who, what, where, when, and why. Which of the 5 W's do you think is more important? Which has a little more weight than the others? Correct. Why? Which I assume you would have said. So why is that more important? Who did it is pretty easy. Where did it happen? When did it happen? What happened? That's pretty easy. Why can get into a deeper understanding of your subject, and also a deeper understanding of the issue, and can give you the most information. It's going to make people justify what they've done. Teaching a journalism class at the Loeb School, oh my goodness, they knew that why was the most important. And it was usually not stated as why, it was stated as what were you thinking when you wrote such and such. It was very helpful. The answer, when you hear the answer, it's like, oh, now I get it. That's from why. Sometimes, other W's are more important. Who is important, obviously, in an election story, but why that person won or lost the election is also important. It can be more important. When you're doing the interview, don't be afraid to say, I didn't really understand that. Say something, because if you don't understand the answer, how can you explain it to someone else? Especially if it's about financial literacy, which most people think they know enough about. That's why we're all in trouble, because we know just enough to be dangerous. So if you don't understand an answer, ask for an explanation so you can, and look for the oh well moment. Look for that cancer combination lock. Everybody has different methods of remembering important quotes or information. I have this nifty pen that has a red ink, black ink, green, blue ink, all on the same pen. And when I'm doing an interview, I flip the color and write, if I hear an answer that's an oh wow moment to me, it's going down in a different color. So that when I go back to it, I can find it right away, or so it stands out. And that's very helpful in the next phase, which is organizing your information, correct? In preparing for this morning, I reviewed a lot of presentations I've done. Some were for high schoolers doing World War II veteran projects, a law firm, and developing a media policy, PR people, police departments, people wanting to tell family stories. It was a lot of material. So I reviewed my goal for today, offering tips on how you can communicate a simple message. And I reviewed the audience, potential, you, and I began ditching information from my other presentations to come down to focus on this one, because the other information detracted from what I wanted to tell you and wasn't as relevant to you. That's where the colored pens come in are helpful. Think of this, bringing information in like this, as sorting socks. What do you do when you sort socks? You have an overwhelming pile of socks, different sizes, different shapes, different colors. What do? What's your first step when you sort socks? You're looking for different colors. The red ones jump out. So I'm going to sort the red ones first. Oh, there's a yellow pair of socks. I'm sorting that yellow pile first. You pull out the ones that grab your attention and you sort them first, and then you get to the rest of the pile. It's the same thing as notes from an interview or notes from research. For me, I sorted by the colors, the color codes I've made. I'm going to grab those red quotes and pull them out and pull things out and put the other stuff on the side, or get to it eventually. And what are you asking when those colors come out? Will it help explain the issue? Will it help keep the message clear? Will it offer the audience an oh wow moment? I hope sorting socks might be one of your oh wow moments from this, because everyone is faced with that huge pile of notes and what to do with it. Preparing the report, everyone runs into obstacles trying to get others to hear our messages. Some of the obstacles we build ourselves by not using clear words, and we build roadblocks instead of a clear path. Some of the obstacles are out of our control. I used to write the annual Old Farmer's Almanac story, and I'd have to go down and interview Judd Hale in Dublin about it. And he would go on a national tour, and he went on a national tour one year to promote the Old Farmer's Almanac, and the Pope died that morning that he was supposed to be on the Today Show and Good Morning America, whatever. So of course he got bumped. So they rescheduled him for, 5 weeks later, and he went on out to the tour, and the Pope died again. It was the year that 2 popes died within 5 weeks. So he got bounced off the air again. It made for a good interview because his comment was the Vatican checks with me on my travel schedule now because they don't want popes dying on them just because I've hit the road. Well, that's out of your control. Using words that throw an obstacle in your path is in your control. So how do we pave that path clearly? Remember your audience, develop that message in 2 or 3 clear points, being sure to remember what you're trying to accomplish. Mine had 4 points in the beginning, those four points of organization and prep, and there'll be some points later. Show or tell the audience why they should care. Communicate, don't pontificate. We'll talk about these in a bit. When in doubt, leave it out. Be accurate, but tell the story. I love that one, and I will pontificate on that in a minute. And unless you're required to write a long report, I hate the assignments, write a 500-word essay on such and such, or write a 3-page essay on such and such. Sometimes it's not worth it. The topic isn't worth 3 pages. So make your report or your presentation long enough to cover the subject, short enough to keep it interesting. And again, you're going to refer back to the 5 W's, of course. I think I've said why more than any other word in this presentation so far. Well, when you're actually beginning to write your report, there's a variation of why that is very important. Not just why, but why should I care? Which is what the audience is going to be saying to you. What's in it for me? What does this mean to me? Why should I care? You have to ask yourself that question, putting yourself in the role of the person reading your report, and it helps guide your message. So why should I care? How to address that could be very simple. One way is adding context. Law firm XYZ is proud to announce that attorney James Smith has joined the firm. That's accurate. But putting it in context might give someone else a reason to care. Attorney James Smith, a national authority on First Amendment law, is joining law firm XYZ. Oh, during this time, more important than ever. Somebody on First Amendment law. Well, now I've got a reason to read the second paragraph, which is your ultimate minor goal. The headline, you hope somebody's written a good headline to make somebody read your lead, your intro. Your intro better be good enough to make somebody want to read the second paragraph, and then the third, then the fourth. That's your job to bring that in. Another way to answer why should I care is to highlight benefits, not features. What do I mean by that? Highlight benefits, not features. Here's a feature. At town meeting, the fire department is asking to buy a pumper truck that can pump 2,000 gallons of water a minute. That's a feature. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what fire trucks pump. But here's the benefit. At town meeting, the fire department is asking to buy a pumper truck that will double the amount of water being pumped by its current truck to better protect your home or business. Same proposal, same truck, same presenter, same audience. Which one's going to sway your vote? There's a benefit to this. The benefit is I can better protect you, not that I have a fancy truck with a bigger pump. Another example of the show's benefits, right? And also kind of gets the message involved if you have a 2 or 3 point message. I'm proposing a shopping center for a certain place. My proposed shopping center will be more convenient for residents because they now have to drive a long way to shop. It's going to help reduce your property taxes, and it's going to help reduce energy use because we're using the latest construction techniques. This is how my proposal will benefit you. You won't have to drive 20 miles. I'm going to be paying a big portion of your property taxes, and we're going to be nice to the environment. instead of just saying, my proposed shopping center is needed in this area, both of which are true, one of which is true and accurate, but tells the story. When you're answering, why should I care? You have to capture and keep the audience's attention. And that's the first paragraph or intro. Give me a reason and be imaginative. For the high school session, I told the class that I would sit in the back row and boo them during their presentation if everyone stood up and said, my name is so-and-so, and my report is about my dad who served on an aircraft carrier in the South Pacific as a cook. I'm going to boo if you all do that. So be imaginative. So of course, everybody then began their report saying, imagine. Well, here was one of the examples I gave. Imagine, I have to go to it because it involved a lot of, imagine working in a restaurant where you mashed 2,000 potatoes a day, cooked 500 steaks, scrambled crates of eggs, and kept gallons of coffee going all day and all night, all the while knowing somebody was out there trying to kill you. That's a cook on an aircraft carrier in the South Pacific, and I'm listening. Same story, both are accurate, one tells the story. And one you kind of have to, okay, well, what's next? I'm not waiting for what's next on that. Boom, I'm in. Jim Smith was charged with obstruction of justice, witness tampering, or criminal threatening. Accurate. Jim Smith was accused of threatening to beat up his roommate if she talked to the police about their alleged drug operation. Tells the story. Which one are you reading the second paragraph in? That's the goal, and that's the question you're asking yourself when you're writing it. Why would this person read my second paragraph if my first one is so boring or doesn't tell the story? Using words, putting together in a way that's a clear message. Another technique, either writing or in an oral presentation, is ask a question up front. Ask the people in the audience, hey, trying to bring them in. Remember how I started this? Asking, is this you? It's deadline time and the coffee's out. There's no coffee and you haven't started. That's a technique, hopefully, to get the audience involved. It was a technique that hopefully you could identify, that would show that I identified with you, and hopefully to get you to say, wow, maybe there's something coming that will help me in this, because that's exactly where I'm at. Asking a question and grabbing people and bringing them in. Keep the language appropriate to the audience. Typically, you don't use big words unless they make a difference in your story. If someone has to have a dictionary next to them while they're reading your report, you haven't communicated, unless you're writing a lesson plan about using a dictionary. Communicate, don't pontificate. Communicate clearly. I took it as a personal challenge to write budget stories, you'll love this, without putting numbers in the lead. Believe it or not, I was an aerobics instructor. I also took it as a personal challenge to not have push-ups or sit-ups in my class. That was easier to do. But I'm going to share a screen here. Take a look at this. Actually, it wasn't a budget story, but it was a story about numbers. Here's one version of the story, which is paying the state's current, you can't see it, right? There we go. How's that? Thumbs up, can you see it? Great. Both of these have leads that are accurate, and one of them, I think, tells the story. Paying the state's current $825 million education tab entirely with the sales tax would require a rate of between 5.3 and 7.7%, yada, yada, yada. I don't know if that's a good percent or a bad percent. In New Hampshire, any percent is bad because there's no sales tax. And there was information later on that talked about that rate hike and what it would mean. Well, here's what it would mean. Give me a reason to read this story. Well, a statewide sales tax to pay for public schools in New Hampshire would have to be so high, it would hurt businesses, especially in retail stores that attract customers from bordering states. That information was in the release. The first version of this story simply used the numbers and hoped that that would be a way to get into the story. It's not a way for me. When I'm reading numbers, sometimes I just get blurred with numbers. This isn't numbers. This tells you, why should I care? Well, you should care because it's going to be pretty high and it's going to hurt business. It's a sales tax that's going to hurt sales, according to this guy. So both accurate, right? I think, and one tells the story. That's part of your goal. Be accurate, but tell the story. Clear language at the AP, we had some dumb rules, not dumb, simple rules, I guess. We laughed at them. How would you tell your grandmother about this topic? How would you tell your family? We joked that no legislator ever went home and said, and I said this to a seminar of legislators, none of you have gone home and said, Eunice, you'll never guess, we voted House Bill 1 inexpedient to legislate. And one legislator raised his hand and said, you're making a major assumption there that Eunice even wants to hear about what we did today in the legislature. But it's jargon, and I'm not listening to the second sentence. Eunice, we killed the budget, the proposal today about making llamas the state animal. Now I'm going to listen. Inexpedient to legislate, great term in the legislature. Be active, not passive. Bureaucrats love being passive. Legislators love being passive. A significant long-term investment was made by the firm in developing this new program. That is way passive. How do you make that active? Simple noun, verb. The firm made a significant long-term investment in this new program. That's the way you talk, right? Burying the lead. It's jargon, but it's also pretty descriptive. It's when that oh well moment or the piece of information that makes this story different or your report different than the last one on this topic is so far down in the story that no one's going to get to it because the top of it is a ho-hum report. I just want to share one item with you. Oh, it's a PDF. You won't be able to read it. It was, which I can't figure out how to get up on the screen. I'm sorry about that. But it was a release put out by the state years ago. Nate Noyes of Silver Lake was sworn in Friday as a state trooper. And there's a paragraph that said the commissioner of safety is giving you the information. The head of the state police helped swear him in. He graduated from high school in 1966. He's going to go into training, and after a year, he's going to be a real trooper. He is the son of Debbie Noyes of Silver Lake and the late New Hampshire State Police Sergeant Jim Noyes, who was killed in the line of duty in 1994. That's the last phrase of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraph story. You aren't even going to know that, right? Because you aren't going to get that far in the story. So what makes this different? How do you unbury the lead? How would you introduce this story? What would your lead be in this story about this new state trooper from Silver Lake, which is a part of Conway, I guess?
Hi, Dave. It's Tori.
Hi, Tori.
I'd go with son of, trooper killed in action is now, it has been accepted into the New Hampshire State Police recruit program or whatever it is.
Exactly. That's what makes this story different. That was burying the lead. And, in a news release, sometimes they're boilerplate news releases. This is the way every single state trooper who is being sworn in is written about. The thing about this story is that it was in the local newspaper, written word for word, instead of having somebody up there say, wow, there's a reason to give people to read this story here. and put that in the lead. So beware of burying the lead. It's easy to say when you're looking at something someone else has written, that person might have written 40 of them that day, I don't know. But it was clearly a boilerplate release that clearly buried the lead. All right, to help boil this all down for a common sense thing, think for a minute about the stories you've read recently, okay, or the presentations you've been to recently. What kept you reading? What kept you paying attention in that story or in that presentation? The topic? Could have done either. The topic could have kept you reading or sent you to another page. What other things might?
Judy, you can go first.
I
saw your hand up.
Interestingly, it is time. And now people don't read like they used to read. They read on the internet. So, you know, you have that first paragraph. That's just, to me, so important. Because if I can skim down 100 stories, which I might do in a morning, and then I kind of can tag something and go back later and finish it if it's something interesting. So to me, time is important. And that first paragraph with that leading title.
Good. That's perfect. Mike, what were you going to say?
I was going to say the content and the way that they're speaking to me. I don't want them to be talking above me. I want to feel like somebody's speaking to me. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps me.
Yep. Details you can identify with, the length of the story, people you can identify with. It's something you care about. All reasons, right, that you're going to stick with it. And speaking of time, I'm looking at the clock, so I'm going to move ahead. There are other things that cause you to ditch the story. You found an error that might not be a huge error, but it's something you know is wrong about the story. So then I'm thinking, what else in there is wrong that I don't know about? So even a simple error, a spelling error in a person's name, might cast some doubt on the story. It's too long and you didn't care. Well, unfortunately, some things, especially when you're writing news stories, a lot of people aren't going to care. It's your job as a reporter to show them why they might want to care. So here's the common sense angle. When you're doing a report or a presentation, include those things that keep you reading and watching and listening, and throw out the ones that are red flags. Double check for spelling. And a common sense goal there for you as a presenter. So presenting your information, you've pulled out your OL moments, you've written an intro to attract attention and keep it, you're using clear language, you revised it a few times to get it just right, cut distractions. Before hitting the send button on a written report or release, and before any oral presentation, read it aloud to yourself. If it bores you, you can bet it's going to bore somebody else. And sometimes it does, and it helps you clarify it. If you have time, have somebody you trust review it, particularly someone who doesn't know the topic. I always wondered why the engineers who designed equipment wrote the user manuals. You know, I would rather write the user manual for something I don't know how to use, because the person reading the user manual is me, not the engineer writing who designed it. Okay, so for an oral presentation, you've done all this stuff. You're the researcher, the interviewer, the writer, the editor. Now you're a performer. You don't want to look at it that way, but you are. The material isn't enough, because if you obscure it by not being prepared or by other things like relying on technology, the message can be lost. It doesn't help if you're hyperventilating. So it has happened to me. So the first word on the top of page 1 of my presentations is breathe. Take a deep breath before you start. You feel like it's a 30-second deep breath. It's not. It's only 3. And there are ways to obscure it. Do it while you're adjusting the microphone. Do it while you're opening your presentation, but breathe. It really does help you get calm. Find a friendly face in the audience and look at that person a lot because you want that feedback. If appropriate, and if your report is about a time or a place, add music. If not during the event, beforehand, when people are coming in and being seated, help set the tone with a tune. Video, PowerPoint, they're tools. For PowerPoint, nobody wants to read your whole script, because if your whole script's on the screen, that's what they're going to do. And they're going to try to find when you deviate from it. When I was a reporter, we were handed prepared remarks, the infamous prepared remarks. And you constantly had to go through and mark it when somebody said something differently. Just put highlights on the screen. Be careful about distractions. One of the presenters at the school talked about a person who gave a speech playing with a ballpoint pen and popped it open, and the spring flew across the stage. The person kept talking, walked over, picked up the spring, put the ballpoint pen back together, and continued the speech. And afterward, they said, "What's the deal with the ballpoint pen?" And he said, "What?" They had to show him the video. He did not remember doing it. So if you play with ballpoint pens, don't take it on the podium with you. If appropriate, near the end of your written report, it can help review to review, or restate your important points. Something like this. If you don't remember anything else today, remember these things. Identify your message. Is everyone seeing this, by the way? Yes? Good. Identify the message, right? Develop your 2 or 3 main points to illustrate that message. Imagine yourself as the reader, not the writer. The listener, not the presenter. Look for the oh wow moment in your research and put them in your project so you can offer oh wow moments for others. Who, what, where, when, why. And know the audience and give them a reason to care by showing benefits, not features. And also be accurate, of course, always, but tell the story. And I will email that list to Judy or folks at Morgan Franklin so we can get that out to you. Finally, end with something memorable. Funny, if it's appropriate. You only get one chance, everybody knows that, to make a good first impression, right? Any first impression. You only get one chance to leave a last impression too. And you don't want to end by saying, "So yeah, that was my presentation. So yeah, that was my presentation."
Thank you, Dave, for joining us and presenting such an important topic. We see this as being multifaceted, where people can use this to construct a story or content that's relevant for them in whatever way possible, whether that's at work, whether that's to help you get a job, or any other potential place that you could leverage this information. Being able to construct a story and convey important points to people is a super important skill set in today's world. So thank you again, Dave, for all of the tips, tricks, and advice for how to construct a great story. You can learn more about the Morgan Franklin Fellowship, our upcoming events, additional resources, and our flagship program at morganfranklinfellowship.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you soon.